They found him alone, slumped over in the bathroom. No signs of injury, no cry for help, just silence and a look of confusion frozen on his face. A 71-year-old widower, towel still in hand, gone after what should have been a simple private morning routine. And sadly, he's not the only one. Every year, thousands of older men fall into the same trap, repeating habits they've carried for decades, never realizing those habits have quietly turned against them. One of the most common: morning masturbation. Something they believed was safe, natural, even healthy. But the truth is darker and far more dangerous than most men ever imagine. I'm Dr. James, a board-certified urologist with over 30 years of experience helping older men restore their energy, protect their prostate, and preserve their independence. I've sat across from men in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, men who never suspected their own morning rituals were inflaming their prostate, weakening their flow, and draining their confidence. Habits they picked up in youth, now silently backfiring in old age. But there's hope. In this video, I'll walk you through the 5 most dangerous morning masturbation mistakes I've seen destroy prostate health and show you exactly how to avoid them. No shame, no judgment, just honest, science-backed answers that could make the difference between living with chronic inflammation or protecting your manhood for years to come. And stay with me until the end, because the final mistake I'll reveal, it's one even most doctors won't mention. Yet it could be the single biggest reason so many older men silently suffer in their most private moments. If you're ready for the truth and you value your health, this video is for you. Type 1. G in the comments if you're with me. Type C0 if not. Either way, I appreciate your honesty. Now let's begin with the first and perhaps most dangerously overlooked mistake that quietly damages the prostate in older men every morning. I'll never forget one of my patients. Let's call him Bill. He was 69 years old, divorced, living alone in a quiet neighborhood just outside Kansas City. He'd always been healthy, active, a former contractor who took pride in staying fit, but one morning he came into my office looking off. Pale, tired, restless. He told me he'd been waking up every day with a strange pressure in his lower abdomen, frequent urges to pee, less force in his stream, and a dull ache he couldn't explain. After some tests and a physical exam, I asked him to walk me through his morning routine. That's when it clicked. Every morning, almost like clockwork, he would roll out of bed and immediately stimulate himself. Just to relax, he said. It helps me start the day. But here's the problem, and it's one I see far too often in older men. When you masturbate immediately upon waking before your body is fully awake, you're forcing a biological process that your system simply isn't ready for. And after 60, that force becomes more than just uncomfortable. It becomes dangerous. Think about what happens to your body overnight. Your heart rate slows, your blood pressure drops, your circulation quiets, your pelvic floor tightens slightly as you lie still for hours. Your testosterone levels, while peaking in the early morning, haven't yet reached full functional activation. And your prostate, it's been stagnant all night, holding pressure, holding fluid. When you stimulate it right away without any transition time, you shock the entire system. You're engaging a sensitive organ that's not primed for action, and if you do this day after day, the prostate begins to show signs of strain. Most men think, if I'm still getting hard in the morning, I must be healthy. But the truth is, that morning erection doesn't mean you're ready. It just means your body is still under the influence of sleep cycle hormones like dopamine and norepinephrine. It's not the same as arousal readiness. And when older men mistake one for the other, they often wind up engaging in habits that push their prostate too hard, too fast. The result? Silent swelling, low-grade inflammation, irritation of the delicate ducts that pass fluid through the gland. I've seen this lead to an increase in PSA levels, the marker we use to track prostate health. I've seen it cause urinary urgency, pain during ejaculation, even perineal soreness that men assume is just part of aging. But it's not aging. It's a warning sign. You see, the prostate doesn't cry out in pain like a pulled muscle or a sprained ankle. It whispers. It sends quiet signals, reduced pleasure, slower urine stream, discomfort during intimacy. And most men don't notice until it's progressed. That's why this mistake is so dangerous. It's not what you feel today, it's what it's building toward tomorrow. The prostate is a slow organ. It doesn't respond with instant feedback. It accumulates damage silently, sometimes for years. And that's why this harmless habit has cost many men their peace of mind and quality of life. The human body, especially after 60, needs time to shift gears in the morning. Before stimulation, the heart needs to wake up. The pelvic floor needs to relax. The blood vessels need to expand. The prostate needs a chance to drain naturally through urination before being asked to contract. Skipping all of that and going straight to climax, it's like flooring the gas pedal while the engine's still cold. Sure, the car moves, but over time, you're destroying the machine from the inside. When I told Bill this, he looked stunned. "I thought I was doing something good for myself," he said, "and that's what breaks my heart the most. Good men, trying to feel alive, to feel masculine, unintentionally hurting themselves in ways no one ever warned them about. That's why I'm here, to be the voice of truth no one else is offering. Because this matters. Your prostate matters. Your vitality, your dignity, your independence, they all begin with how you treat your body when no one else is watching. So what should you do instead? Give your body 30 minutes. Let the blood flow, urinate, stretch, breathe. Reconnect to your body without pressure. If you still feel the urge after that, fine. At least now your system is prepared, your prostate is supported, your health is prioritized. And if you're serious about protecting it long term, this is the first change you must make. But this is only the beginning, because what most men do next, holding in their urine while masturbating, is perhaps even more dangerous and more common than you'd ever imagine. Let me show you why that habit might be slowly suffocating your prostate from the inside. He was the kind of man who rarely complained, a retired firefighter in his early 70s, still strong for his age, but clearly tired. When he came into my office, his complaint wasn't about pain, it wasn't about performance. It was about control, or rather the slow, frustrating loss of it. He said he was finding himself rushing to the bathroom more often. Sometimes he didn't make it, other times he'd go and still feel like he needed to go again a few minutes later. It wasn't urgency alone, it was a constant pressure. A sense that something deeper wasn't working quite right. I asked him what his mornings looked like. He hesitated. That pause told me everything, and finally he said, "Sometimes I don't go to the bathroom right away. I handle other things first." That's not uncommon. I've heard the same thing from dozens of men his age. They wake up with an urge, but not to urinate. They stimulate themselves first, thinking they'll relieve both urges at once. But what they don't realize is that this habit, masturbating while holding in urine, is like clamping a hose, then forcing water through it under pressure. And when that hose is wrapped around your prostate, the effects are quietly devastating. The prostate sits directly beneath the bladder, wrapped around the urethra, the tube that carries both urine and semen out of the body. When your bladder is full, it becomes like a heavy balloon resting on the prostate, compressing it, flattening it. And if you engage in sexual stimulation or climax while that pressure is still bearing down, you're forcing the prostate to contract under load. This strains the muscle fibers of the gland, irritates the nerves, and in many cases leads to a backflow phenomenon known as retrograde ejaculation, where semen flows backward into the bladder instead of outward through the urethra. Most men don't feel it the first few times, maybe just a weaker orgasm or a strange discomfort they can't explain. But over time, this routine becomes a trigger for inflammation. The men who do this regularly often end up with symptoms that don't fit into any clear diagnosis. A feeling of heaviness in the pelvis, a dull ache between the scrotum and anus, a weak stream of urine, or a burning sensation that comes and goes. They're told it's just aging or mild prostatitis. But the truth, it's often the direct result of overstimulating the prostate under pressure again and again. When urine sits in the bladder, especially overnight, it becomes slightly acidic. Combine that with the pressure of a full bladder during ejaculation, and you've created the perfect storm for micro-injury inside the prostate. These injuries don't bleed, they don't scream, but they scar. And that scarring over months and years leads to narrowing of ducts, chronic congestion, and an immune response that keeps the gland inflamed long after the climax ends. I've had men look at me with disbelief when I explain this. "You're saying holding in my pee damaged my prostate?" they ask. And I tell them yes, not all at once, but silently, slowly, repeatedly. It's like letting water drip on stone. It doesn't seem like much. But give it time, whoops, and it carves a groove. And the saddest part? It was avoidable. All it takes is a shift in sequence. Wake, urinate, empty the bladder completely. Let the pressure off the prostate. Then, if your body still desires stimulation, you'll at least be doing it under safer conditions. Conditions where your prostate can contract without strain and flush without resistance. This simple change, just reversing the order, has helped hundreds of my patients reduce pelvic discomfort, restore bladder control, and even improve their sexual satisfaction. Because when the body is aligned, the systems support each other. But when you skip steps or override natural reflexes, especially after 60, the consequences come quietly, but steadily. So if this sounds like you, I urge you to take this seriously. Not just for your comfort, but for your long-term independence. Because unchecked prostate inflammation isn't just uncomfortable. It can lead to complications that affect everything from sleep quality to intimacy to kidney health. But while this mistake is more common than you think, it's not the only hidden danger lurking in the morning routine. There's another habit that's just as widespread and perhaps even more damaging because it goes unnoticed by nearly every man I see. I'm talking about the position you choose while masturbating. It may seem harmless, but the way you sit, slouch, or strain could be slowly sabotaging your pelvic floor and silently choking your prostate with every movement. Let's explore that next. He was 73, soft-spoken and polite to a fault. A retired pastor who had always taken care of his health, walked every morning, ate clean, avoided alcohol, but something was bothering him. He looked me in the eyes during his appointment and said, "Doctor, I don't know how to say this without sounding silly, but it feels like there's a knot between my legs. Not pain exactly, just pressure, deep, persistent pressure." I knew that feeling all too well. I'd heard it from dozens of older men before, and when I asked him how he typically positioned himself during those quiet, private morning moments, he blinked. Then admitted, almost sheepishly, "I usually sit on the edge of the bed, hunched forward. I didn't think that mattered." But it does matter, more than most men realize, especially after 60. When you sit hunched over on the toilet, on the edge of a bed, in a low chair, you're compressing your lower spine and tightening your pelvic floor muscles. Those muscles, especially the ones surrounding the prostate, the bulbospongiosus and pubococcygus, are small but crucial. They control blood flow, ejaculation, bladder function, and support the very gland we're trying to protect, your prostate. Every time you stimulate yourself in that bent, clenched position, you're forcing these muscles to contract under tension. You're straining the connective tissues that support the gland, and over time, that repeated tension becomes chronic. Imagine this. You clench your fist for 30 seconds. Not bad. Do it every morning for 5 minutes straight, every day for years. Eventually, the muscles seize up. They stiffen. They shorten. They ache. That's what happens in your pelvis, except here the stakes are higher. Because when the pelvic floor becomes dysfunctional, the prostate loses its natural support. The muscles that should help drain it begin to squeeze unevenly or remain locked. The nerves become irritated. Blood flow becomes restricted, and the entire region enters a state of low-grade inflammation. Men with this issue don't usually show up saying, "My posture is hurting me." They show up saying, "Why do I feel sore after I climax?" Or, "Why is there a burning sensation days after?" Or, "Why does sitting down feel uncomfortable now?" Signs are subtle, but they're real, and they almost always point to one thing: years of straining the body in silence. Most men have never even heard of the pelvic floor, let alone thought about how to protect it, but that's the core of the problem. After 60, these muscles begin to lose elasticity on their own. Add years of bad posture, tight hips, and awkward masturbation positions, and you've created the perfect storm, one that pulls on the prostate, restricts its movement, and keeps it locked in a cycle of dysfunction. It's not just about comfort. A tight pelvic floor chokes the nerves that support ejaculation, desensitizes the prostate, and can even lead to chronic prostatitis, a condition where the gland becomes tender, inflamed, and hypersensitive. I've seen grown men reduced to tears in my office, not from pain alone, but from the sheer frustration of not knowing what's wrong. And too often the answer is something as small as posture. But the solution isn't complicated. It starts with awareness. Sit upright, support your lower back. Keep your hips relaxed and your feet flat. Breathe deeply. Let your body open, not compress. You wouldn't lift weights with bad form, so why would you treat your most sensitive internal systems with less care, especially when your prostate, already aging, already vulnerable, depends on that care to function properly? What breaks my heart is how preventable this damage is. Most men simply aren't told. They carry habits from their 20s into their 60s, not realizing their body is different now, less forgiving, more delicate, more prone to silent injury. But with a few adjustments, many of these issues can be reversed or avoided entirely. The men who take this seriously, who change the way they approach self-pleasure, often report more control, better sensation, fewer urinary problems, and less lingering discomfort. So if you're waking up and curling forward, clenching your body tight and forcing release through tension, you may be unknowingly choking off the very circulation your prostate needs to stay healthy. It's not about shame, it's about preservation, and your future self will thank you for thinking about this now. But posture is just one piece of the puzzle, because the next mistake is more subtle and far more dangerous. It has nothing to do with how you sit, and everything to do with how fast you finish. In fact, what most men think is just being efficient in the morning may actually be triggering a hormonal crash that drains their energy, weakens their prostate, and damages intimacy over time. Let me show you how rushing to climax could be silently wrecking more than just your mood. He was a former athlete, 72 years old, built like a linebacker even after all these years. Still proud of his body, still disciplined about his routines. But when he came to see me, he wasn't feeling strong anymore. He looked frustrated, even a little ashamed. "Doc," he said, "I still get urges in the morning, but the release, it's different now. Feels forced, empty, like something's off." And he wasn't the first man to tell me that, not by a long shot. You see, what most men don't realize is that the way they climax matters just as much as the act itself. And one of the most damaging habits I see in older men, especially in the morning, is this: forcing ejaculation too quickly under high tension. It usually happens without much thought. A rushed start to the day, an overwhelming urge, maybe even a sense of guilt or the need to just get it over with. So they tighten their grip, hold their breath, clench their jaw, and chase release like it's a task to be completed. But that moment of tension, that flood of pressure, comes at a steep and silent cost. Because what they're actually doing is shocking the prostate under duress. Let me explain. After 60, your prostate is no longer as resilient as it once was. The tissues are more delicate, the blood vessels more fragile, and the nerves more easily irritated. When you force climax without allowing the body to gradually prepare, when you stimulate with speed and tension instead of presence and relaxation, you activate your sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight-or-flight mode. Your blood vessels constrict, your pelvic muscles tighten, your breathing shallows, and in the middle of that stress response, your prostate is forced to contract and release. It's like asking a sponge to squeeze itself dry without giving it water first. Over time, this habit leads to what I call silent trauma. It doesn't scream, it doesn't cause instant pain, but it leaves microscopic damage. Small tears in the tissue, reduced fluid flow, irritated ducts, and eventually inflammation. The result? You might start to feel less pleasure, more sensitivity or soreness afterward. You might notice a drop in energy after climax, a kind of emotional crash that lasts all day. And more importantly, your prostate begins to operate under chronic stress. That's when trouble sets in. I've had men come to me wondering why they suddenly feel pressure after urinating or why their ejaculation feels weaker than it used to. And more often than not, the root of the problem is that they've trained their body to finish too fast, too hard, too often. Their prostate doesn't get the time or support it needs to function smoothly. It's being asked to work under unnatural pressure, day after day, week after week. And for men over 60, that's a recipe for long-term dysfunction. But here's what no one tells you. Climax is not a sprint. Especially at this stage of life, it should be a process of deep breathing, relaxation, gentle engagement with your body. The more rushed you are, the more likely you are to choke off the very circulation your prostate needs to stay healthy. It's not about slowing down for the sake of romance. It's about slowing down to preserve your organs, your function, and your ability to feel like yourself. One of the best things I've seen older men do for their prostate is to relearn the art of release. Not just the act, but the mindset behind it. Let go of urgency, let go of pressure, allow yourself to feel, breathe, stretch, prepare. When climax happens from a relaxed body, the prostate releases fluid naturally. Blood flow improves, drainage happens efficiently. Hormones rebalance, the body heals, but when climax is rushed, squeezed, and forced, it leaves behind tension that lingers in the soft tissue. And over time, that tension hardens into dysfunction. So if you're someone who wakes up and races through self-stimulation just to get it over with, I urge you to stop and reconsider. This isn't just about pleasure, it's about protecting one of the most sensitive and essential parts of your body. Because your prostate doesn't care about speed, it cares about safety. And after 60, safety starts with intention. Now, what if I told you that even if you got everything else right, timing, posture, breathing, but you still made one final mistake, it could undo all your progress? Because the last mistake I'm about to share with you is the most deceptive of all. It hides in plain sight, disguised as routine. And it's the one mistake that's quietly worn down the prostate health of thousands of older men I've treated, men who never knew what was causing their long-term discomfort. Let's talk about the morning habit that sounds harmless, but may be robbing your prostate of its chance to recover. He was a 67-year-old man, quiet and soft-spoken, a retired engineer who spent his life solving other people's problems with precision. But when he sat down in my office, there was a different kind of problem in his eyes, one he couldn't quite put into words. "Doc," he finally said, "I still feel desire in the morning. That hasn't gone away, but lately it's been followed by fatigue. Not just in my body, but here," he said, pointing to his lower abdomen. "It's like I'm running on empty down there, like something's not bouncing back." I nodded. I'd heard this before, more times than I can count. He wasn't doing anything that seemed harmful. In fact, he was doing what many older men are quietly doing across the country, waking up, taking a few minutes for himself, and releasing some tension before the day begins. But what he didn't realize, and what so many men don't realize, is that even the healthiest systems in the body require time to recover, and the prostate is no exception. After age 60, your prostate is no longer the factory it once was. It still works, yes, but not with the same efficiency or resilience. Its tissues are softer, more vulnerable. Its ducts drain more slowly. Its capacity for repair decreases. And when you stimulate it, especially daily, without allowing for rest, you're placing that gland into a state of repeated contraction without sufficient time to heal. The result? Congestion, inflammation, and long-term dysfunction that sneaks up without warning. The prostate produces a significant portion of your seminal fluid, and every time you ejaculate, that gland is forced to contract to release that fluid. But if you're asking it to do that every single morning without pause, without break, you're draining its reserves and tightening its muscles again and again, like revving an engine without ever letting it cool. Over time, this leads to what we call chronic pelvic congestion, a condition where the prostate becomes inflamed not because of infection, but because it's never given time to rest. Men who do this often start to notice subtle changes, a need to urinate more frequently, a dull ache after climax, a soft pulsing pressure deep in the groin. These aren't random symptoms. They're your body's way of whispering that the system is overloaded. But the damage is silent. It doesn't scream. It builds quietly day after day, morning after morning, until one day the system begins to fail. I've seen men like this with normal PSA levels and no visible abnormalities on imaging, and yet they suffer. They don't sleep well. They feel weaker. Their libido drops, and they don't know why. But it's often because they've forgotten something simple but vital. Recovery is not optional. It's biological law, and after 60, it's more important than ever. Your prostate, just like your heart or your muscles, needs cycles of effort and rest. It needs days where it can drain gently through natural urination, not be forced into contraction by stimulation. It needs blood flow without inflammation. It needs quiet. And when you give it that, when you allow for 2 or 3 rest days each week, you're not depriving yourself. You're preserving yourself. You're giving that small but mighty gland the space it needs to keep working, to keep you feeling vital, clear-headed, and capable. This mistake isn't talked about because it sounds harmless. Daily release is something many men grew up believing was good, but beliefs don't always age with the body. What worked in your 30s or even your 50s may not serve you in your 60s or 70s. You don't need to stop, unless your body's asking you to. But you do need to rethink how often and why and whether it's worth pushing through fatigue for a moment of fleeting relief. Because here's the truth I want every man to hear. When you give your prostate room to recover, you're not just helping that one gland. You're improving your bladder control. You're protecting your erections. You're easing pressure on your kidneys. You're investing in the kind of health that shows up not in one big moment, but in all the small daily victories. Like walking without discomfort, sleeping through the night, and enjoying intimacy without fear or pain. So if you've made this mistake, if you've been pushing your body every morning without pause, I hope you'll reconsider. Not out of guilt, but out of wisdom. Because real strength isn't in how often you perform, it's in how well you recover. Now that you've seen all 5 of these silent mistakes, the question becomes, what can you actually do to support and protect your prostate starting tomorrow morning? And here's the good news. There is a way. In the final part of this message, I'll share with you a simple, science-backed morning ritual I teach my patients, one that helps reset circulation, reduce pressure on the prostate, and restore natural balance to your body. Most men have never heard of it, but the results, they speak for themselves. Let me show you. Some of the most dangerous habits in life don't come with sirens or sudden pain. They arrive quietly. They become routine, familiar, comfortable even, and because they feel harmless, they go unchallenged. That's exactly why so many older men end up suffering in silence, not from bad choices made in malice, but from years of doing what they thought was right, what they thought was normal, without ever being told otherwise. Each of the 5 mistakes we talked about today, stimulating yourself the moment you wake up, holding in urine during climax, straining in poor posture, forcing release too quickly, and never allowing the prostate to rest. Each of these might seem small on their own, but together they create a pattern, a rhythm of tension, pressure, and overload that your prostate was never built to endure, especially not after 60. I've seen the outcomes up close, not just in charts or test results, but in faces. In the way older men sit in the chair across from me, shoulders tense, not knowing how to describe the changes they've felt. The quiet urgency in their voices, the fear that something is slipping, something important, and they can't quite catch it in time. And what hurts the most is knowing how many of these men could have been spared that confusion, if only someone had told them the truth sooner. That's why I do this. Not to shame, not to judge, but to offer clarity. Because knowledge is a kind of medicine too. When you understand what your body needs, and more importantly, what it no longer tolerates, you're finally in a position to make real change. Change that doesn't just improve one morning, but restores years of confidence, control, and peace. If you're over 60 and any of this sounds familiar, I want you to know it's not too late. The prostate is an incredibly resilient organ. Given the right care, less strain, more rest, better circulation, it can bounce back. Inflammation can ease, sensation can return, function can improve, but that starts with awareness, with listening, with treating your body as something sacred, not something automatic. You've spent a lifetime being strong for others, working hard, carrying weight. Now it's time to protect yourself, and that begins with letting go of old routines that no longer serve you. Give your body permission to recover. Choose posture that supports you. Breathe deeper, slow down, and never forget, just because a habit is private doesn't mean it's harmless. I've walked this road with hundreds of men, veterans, teachers, fathers, grandfathers, who thought they had to endure these problems alone. But once they understood the root of their symptoms, everything changed. Their posture improved. Their confidence returned. Their intimacy deepened. And many of them told me the same thing afterward. "Doctor, I wish I had known this 20 years ago." Well, now you do. So if this message resonated with you, do something simple but powerful. Type 1 in the comments to let me know you're with me. If you feel unsure or disagree, that's okay too. Type 0 and let me know what you'd like more clarity on. Either way, your voice matters. And the more conversations we have around men's health, the real, honest kind, the more lives we can protect together. And if you're still here, I've got something special for you. In my next video, I'll be walking you through a gentle 5-minute morning ritual that helps reduce prostate pressure, improve blood flow to the pelvic region, and kickstart your day without strain or fatigue. It's a simple practice, no medications, no gimmicks, just mindful movement and breath, tailored for men over 60. And it's helped many of my patients reclaim their mornings without pain or pressure. You've already taken the hardest step, facing the truth. Now let's move forward, together. I'm Dr. James. Thank you for trusting me with your time, your attention, and your health. I'll see you in the next video.